On a hot July night in Chicago, 34-year-old Jamie O'Neill is walking home from the store. As usual, she walks through her neighborhood, not expecting any problems. But this time she is met by a cop in a squad car. He orders her to get down on her knees. Everyone knows it's abuse, but Jamie is not ready to give up. This will be the beginning of her struggle that will change the lives of not only her, but her family and the entire community. Chicago. It's a July night in 2025. The air was stale, heavy with the heat that held the city in its grip. The street was empty, only the hum of air conditioning and the sound of music from distant cars. Jamie O'Neill, 34, was leaving a local store. In her hands was an ordinary grocery bag. Milk, bread, and some vegetables. Only a few blocks from her home, she felt a strange look. Not a suspicious look, but the look she had seen many times before. A look that knew she was a stranger here. She was walking down a familiar street, quiet and dark. Concrete blocks of old houses, burned-out windows, but this was her place. Her neighborhood. Her home. She stopped at a skewed streetlight and suddenly heard the sound of a patrol car approaching. Everything in her heart froze. The car pulled up next to her, and a cop looked out of the window. He was tall, with a square jaw, short hair, and seemed oblivious to any other reality but the street. White-skinned, his blue eyes were cold and indifferent. He didn't seem to have anything positive in mind. "What are you doing here?" His voice was sharp and commanding. Jamie stopped, looked at him, clutching her bag. "I'm going home," she replied calmly. But he had no intention of leaving her alone. His voice took on a different tone, disgust, even more contempt. "You don't look quite normal. What's in your bag?" He held out his hand, pointing to her bag. Jamie could not believe her ears. Her heart started to beat faster, but she wasn't afraid. She knew that look, those words, that game. And she knew that she had to keep going. "It's just food," she said, keeping her voice low. "I'm not going to kneel before you. I'm not breaking the law." His eyes flashed with anger. He didn't like people like her, people who didn't obey. He got out of the car and approached her. His posture was aggressive, and he seemed ready for a conflict. "Are you kidding me? You don't have a choice." He gritted his teeth as he came closer. "I said get on your knees, now." Jamie felt her muscles tense, but she stood still. There was a determined fire in her eyes that wasn't going to go away. "You can't make me do this. I'm not a criminal." Her voice sounded firm, even though everything around her was getting more and more tense. Then, as Jamie had predicted, the situation began to get more dangerous. The cop raised his hand, and she felt his fingers descend on her arm. He squeezed her wrist tightly and pulled her toward him. But just then, a new car came to an abrupt stop on the sidewalk, and its doors opened and a tall man in a suit stepped out, Detective James O'Neill, her brother. His black eyes were unwavering, and his confident posture instantly gave the command that there was going to be a fight. He was not ready to wait for his sister to become another victim of the system. "Let her go," he shouted. His voice was stern, but it contained a force that instantly convinced the cop that he had no right to act as he planned. James walked over and put his hand on Jamie's shoulder, pulling her away from the patrolman. "Let go of my sister." Now, his words were like a shot. But the cop didn't want to give up so easily. His face changed. Now it was not only resentment, but also indignation. "This is not your zone, O'Neill," he hissed. "Leave me alone. You don't even know who I am." Jamie clenched her teeth. She felt her heart pounding in her chest. It didn't matter who the man was anymore. All that mattered was that she couldn't give in. Let her go. James was ready to go all the way. They stood against each other like two opponents in a battle. Time seemed to stand still. But the cop could not answer the call. His face turned red with malicious anger. He powerlessly pushed Jamie back and abruptly turned to his car, which was rattling on the asphalt. "This is not over," he said. Jamie felt relief wash over her. She lowered her head, her hands shaking, but it wasn't from fear, it was from the fact that they hadn't broken. James looked at his sister. He couldn't hide the pain in his eyes, but he also saw something strong in her gaze. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice a little softer. "I will be," she answered. Her jaw was clenched, and determination blossomed in her heart. In that moment, a small victory in the shadow of a great struggle was the beginning of something greater, something that would bring about not only change in their lives, but in their entire community. The streets of Chicago felt empty as Jamie and James walked home, and the air was hot, as if the earth itself was refusing to let go of the heat. She didn't turn around to look at the missing cop car. One thought was running through her mind. This incident was only the beginning, and now she would have to fight not only for her honor, but also for her freedom. Jamie looked into Jameis' face, his grim expression leaving no room for doubt. She didn't need to say anything. They both knew that this night would not be over. Maybe to others it looked like an accident, just another fight in the street. But Jamie could feel the incident running deeper into their lives. When they reached home, Jamie pushed on the door, a little more nervous than usual. She looked at her arm, where there were still marks from the police officer pulling her toward him. The wounds from the handcuffs were healing slowly, but the feeling of helplessness remained. "I know what you're going to say," Jamie said, letting her brother into the apartment, where old photos of their family hung on the walls, "and I know you're ready to go all the way. But he's not alone. Do you realize that?" James stood in the doorway, closing the door behind him. He took a deep breath and looked down. "It's not just that cop," he said, understanding what she was saying. "I've been hearing about him for a long time, Jamie. It's not the first time he's hidden his affairs. And it's not the first time I've heard about his connections. It seems he's been under the wing of those who have no business being on the force for a long time." Jamie sat down on the couch and stared into space. She had known for a long time that there was a dark side to the police that was not talked about in the news. She had heard from others how the victims were left without the truth and the perpetrators were not punished. But this time the situation was different. She was in the line of fire. "What are you going to do?" Jamie asked without looking at him. "And should you?" "I can't let this go." James stopped, looking at his sister. "I'm not going to let this system break you. And I want to keep quiet." Her heart was beating faster, but she knew the fight was about to begin. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark courtyard. It was hard for her. Every day was lived on the edge, between despair and hope, between truth and lies. The idea of fighting for justice made her heart leap, but the fear of those in power was her real enemy. At that moment, a call to her cell phone cut off her thoughts. Jamie grabbed the phone off the table when she saw the name on the screen, Chris, her former classmate and a lawyer with whom she was on good terms. "Hi, Chris." She tried to remain calm, but her voice betrayed her nervousness. "Jamie, I heard about what happened." Chris' voice was quiet, but there was a pent-up anxiety in it. "I want to help. We have to find a way to prove that this was all a setup. But you have to be prepared for the fact that this is not just a fight against one police officer. It will be a fight against the whole system. And that system is very strong right now." Jamie was silent for a few seconds, clutching the phone in her hand. She knew Chris was right. It wasn't just a personal grudge, but an institution that often defended its own, even when they were wrong. "Are you ready to help?" she asked, her voice not lowering, but rather sounding like a manifesto. "We have to survive. Not only for me, but for others who are under this brutal pressure." Chris fell silent before answering. Jamie sensed that an important decision was also being made on the other end of the line. "Yes," he said, his voice firm and determined. "We'll start by finding the evidence. They'll help you get the surveillance footage from your house, and we'll find witnesses. And then we'll move quickly." She set the phone down and looked at James. "We can do this, right?" she asked, not demanding an answer, but looking for confirmation of his belief. James sat down next to her and put his arm around her shoulders. "We can do this," he said. "To let go of this is to lose. And I'm not going to lose. Not when we have the truth on our side." That night, Jamie decided that she would no longer be silent. Those cops who thought they were invincible would now have a chance to learn that the truth could be more powerful than any lie. She had no intention of giving up. Her fight was just beginning. And this first step, taken in the dark, became a promise for her and for everyone who has ever felt the heavy breath of the system. The next day, Jamie woke up with the feeling that the world around her had not just changed, it had become different, darker, with all its undercurrents and secrets. She sat at the kitchen table, looking at her phone, which was once again bugging her, constantly ringing, messages, questions. Everyone knew about her incident with the cop, but she wasn't ready to share her plans. She kept everything to herself until she had a clear strategy. Instead of rushing into decisions, she decided to give it time. She could wait a few days to find out more, to find other evidence, to get surveillance video, to ask friends. That same morning, Jamie received a message from Chris. He had found some important evidence that could be decisive. Cameras from a neighborhood store captured cops patrolling near her house. Moreover, Chris learned that not one of the police officers involved in the case was at work on the day of the incident. All these facts raised important questions about evidence tampering and abuse of power. But every new step felt dangerous. Jamie dialed Chris's number. The phone was picked up immediately. "I know what you found," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Are we ready to use it?" You don't understand how important it is to gather more evidence, Chris replied. If we want to make a real impact, we need even more testimony, and the best part is another piece of evidence from the police station itself. I've heard that some of those who work in this police force have a dark side, and there are connections that never come to the surface. These words kept ringing in Jamie's head. She knew that any step toward a deeper investigation would put her on a dangerous path. She realized that if the police found out that she was going to collect this evidence, she would have a hard time getting out of this situation alive. Despite all the risks, she realized that she couldn't stop any longer. She had nowhere to go. The system covering up the police was much stronger than she could have ever imagined. The next day, Jamie and James met in the afternoon to discuss strategy. They had already planned several steps, but they couldn't overlook the main point. They had to get to the source of the problem. James had received an anonymous call from a colleague who confided that several highly professional police officers from the same department as Kelly had close ties to the criminal underworld. It was a crazy twist that could have led to a shift in the case toward investigating entire conspiracies. They decided to contact Internal Affairs and find out more, but it was another risky gamble. As Jamie prepared for the next phase of the fight, she felt that preparing for this moment was only the beginning. She had already been willing to sign up for millions of compromises for justice, but those compromises always required something that was too important to forget. Jamie pulled out her phone again. She found the number of her lawyer, Chris. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, taking a deep breath. "I feel like we're out of luck this time if we don't go for something more." "It's not just your question anymore," Chris said. "You're in grave danger. You have to get that evidence, even if it means breaking all the rules. You're playing with fire. And if you're trying to clear your honor, that's going to be your most difficult task yet." Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she felt her resolve growing. She was ready to take any steps, even the most dramatic ones, to get what she truly deserved. And that was just the beginning. Jamie decided to go all the way, without looking back, and at that very moment she felt, for the first time in all that time, her heart was filled not just with fear, but with confidence that she was on the right track. She was ready for the next step in their fight for justice. Each new day brought more pressure. Jamie and James realized that their lives had changed once and for all. After they learned about the corruption that was spreading in the heart of the police, every step they took became more dangerous. Gathering evidence was one thing, but now they knew there was nowhere to stop. If they didn't take control of the situation, the consequences could be catastrophic not only for them, but for the entire neighborhood where they grew up. At night, after several hours of computer work and phone calls, Jamie received a message from Chris. He had found new surveillance footage of her house that provided further evidence that the cops had indeed come with the intention of conducting a staged search and that Kelly had definitely manipulated the evidence. They could outsmart him, but they had to act quickly. Jamie met with her brother that evening. They were sitting in her living room, spread out on the kitchen table, documents, records, and photos. James leaned back, his face sad and his eyes determined. "We're at the end of our rope, Jamie. They're not just going to stop us. They're going to break us if we're not careful," he said quietly, as if to himself. "They have connections. They won't stop until they take us down." Jamie looked at him, as if searching for support in his eyes. She realized that taking on the system was one thing, but fighting against an entire structure where everyone was hiding each other was much harder. "I know what you're thinking," she said, "but we can't turn back. Maybe this is our only opportunity to change the system. And if we don't act now, we will never be able to look people in the eye." Her voice was firm, but she still felt anxious inside. Justice is a concept to live by, but does it always bring peace? Perhaps the truth is a path to more destruction. Meanwhile, Chris reported that he had received new documents confirming that Kelly had been involved in suspicious businesses. All these years he had used his position to blackmail, bribe, and even cover up criminal deals. These documents could have been the decisive evidence to get Kelly. But at that moment, the call came again. Jamie looked at the phone screen. The number was unknown. Doubting, she picked up the phone anyway. "Jamie O'Neill," said the voice on the other end of the line. It was a rough male voice. "Don't run away from us. We know what you're doing." Jamie froze. A second of silence, and her heart froze in her chest. "I know who you are, and I know what you want," she said coldly, not even trying to hide her fear. The voice on the other end of the line laughed. "Oh, you don't know what you're in for yet. We're not interested in you yet. But your brother, we're very interested in him. Remember that, Jamie." And then the line went dead. Jamie put the phone down on the table, her eyes blank. She felt a shadow fall over her heart. This call wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. They didn't just want to break her, they wanted to destroy her family, her brothers and sisters. And James was next in line. "Did you hear that?" James asked, noticing the change in her expression. "Yes, I did. They know we're going all the way. But they also know we won't stop," she said, looking him in the eye. "You're not alone in this fight, brother." But despite her determination, Jamie could feel the pressure building. Their enemies were getting closer, and there was something invisible watching them with every step. They were moving on the edge, and there was no guarantee that they would make it out of this game alive. A few hours later, Jamie received another call. It was Chris. He sounded nervous. "You won't believe what I've found," he said. "I've found another witness. A senior inspector who knows Kelly. He's willing to testify. But we need to act now. If we don't do it now, they'll cover it up." This was the decisive moment. Now they had a real opportunity to expose Kelly and all his accomplices. But they had to act quickly and decisively. Once they made the first move, things could spiral out of control. Jamie looked at James, and his gaze was no longer as sad as before. They knew this was their chance. They couldn't back down. "Let's go public," Jamie said, taking a deep breath. "It's now or never." But would it be enough to stop Kelly? And could they survive these new threats? They were willing to risk everything, even their lives, to get justice.